welcome back to Arts Respond. I'm Lucy Gellman. This is a new-ish collaboration. I feel like I'm still riding that wave of smooth jazz. This is a new-ish collaboration between the Arts Council of Greater New Haven, the Arts Paper, and WNHHLP Community Radio. I'm very excited to be here today with Adriane Jefferson. Adriane is the Director of Cultural Affairs for the City of New Haven. And Adriane, I think it is safe to say you have had the wildest onboarding period, certainly for anyone in this position in the city, but like maybe for anyone in this position ever?
Maybe. I mean, who knows what it was like before, but obviously with the conditions of the pandemic, it has made this very interesting. I started February 3rd. And how long have we been in the pandemic? About 60 days working.
It's been about 8 weeks. So yeah.
Yeah, been about 60 days. So that means that majority of the time I've spent has been on COVID-19 efforts and working from home. So it definitely has been a different type of onboarding situation.
Mm-hmm. So we'll get into that. First, I want to talk for people who may not know you, although you have made yourself known in the city, and I want to talk about that because I think it's fantastic. But for people who might not know you or who might not understand why there needs to be a director of cultural affairs in a city, and I as a person who am in the arts and writing about the arts, really do think it's a need. What do you do? Explain to our listeners what you do a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So as you said, I am the Director of Cultural Affairs for the City of New Haven. Some people refer to it as the Director of Arts, Culture, and Tourism. So really what we do is support the infrastructure of the arts in the City of New Haven. Very much like my prior job where I was responsible for being a part of the team that helped to support the structure of the infrastructure of arts in the state of Connecticut. It's doing that on a smaller, more compressed level, really focusing on arts activities, arts programming, arts and culture programming, and how we can cultivate and make difference through the arts, through the lens of the arts, and provide opportunity through the lens of the arts. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do. But really that incorporates many different things. That's policy making, really looking at, what policies are we putting in place that can have a cross-sector approach with other different departments. It's also looking at how do we develop grant programs and become grant makers to be able to get resources out into the community, to our creative sector. How are we building it from a tourism perspective and having programs that are culturally relevant that nowhere else maybe in the entire nation is doing and bringing people here. But I would say the biggest part of this role is connectivity with people and really making sure that approach, no matter what it is, no matter what rolls out of this department, it really has a lens on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we are breaking down barriers and using the arts to break down barriers so that we can have some real conversation and real problem solving about social change initiatives.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that, and I do want to get into how your work has changed and how you've really had to pivot and you've been quite nimble during the pandemic. But I want to go a little further into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work, because sometimes people hear that and they think buzzwords, but I think also there's a lot of lip service in the arts. And this is something that you have not been quiet about. I think the first time I saw you speak, it was when you were testifying at a hearing in Hartford at the state level. And I thought, I want to know exactly who this person is, because one, I want to write about her, but two, I'm pretty sure I also want to be her friend. And so I'm wondering.
We have become friends.
Well, thank you. I feel like officially I'm one of the cool kids now, but I'm wondering if you can talk about what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually means when it is enforced on the ground, because we hear a lot of arts institutions, not just in the state of Connecticut, I'm not pointing fingers, but across the country using this word inclusion. And what we've seen, especially now, is often the first people to be cut during a pandemic are gig workers and teaching artists who are often people of color.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. And to be honest, it is they are buzzwords now, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion for some people is now becoming this new thing, this new epiphany. But the reality is diversity, equity, and inclusion is really based off of structural issues that we have within our systems that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and have existed in the United States for hundreds of years since slavery, right? So when you're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, be it through an arts lens or be it through any sector, you really need to talk about doing, like you said, the groundwork. And what that looks like is when you say, I'm going to be more inclusive, that means you're making space on your board of directors. That means your
Mm-hmm.
board of directors doesn't necessarily look all one color. That means you're making space for people of color in leadership positions. Okay, not just administrative assistants or programming people. So it's really about what you're gonna not just speak with your mouth, but put into practice in the policies and in the infrastructure of your entire organization. So for me, diversity, equity, and inclusion really is about a shifting of culture. And you really have to, I always say, you have to, this is something you have to believe in your heart. You really have to believe in and be able to practice it and be aware and be conscious of when other people do not have seats at the table, and where you can create seats at the table for people who do not have opportunities to be at that table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for many different reasons. It's, again, it always comes down to the systems and the way it has been designed. So I think, just to keep it, short, because I can really talk about this, as you know, I can talk about this. I think it's about putting your money where your mouth is always. And when there is an opportunity for you to bring someone else to the table, really looking at it through an inclusive lens. I think it's just very important to do.
So you come into New Haven February 3rd. You've got this vision. In January, members of a mayoral transition committee presented a transition report that suggested that they and Mayor Justin Elicker were very much on board with the idea of cultural equity work. And then, like a month in, about 4 weeks in, maybe 4.5 weeks in, City Hall closes down.
Right.
Talk me through that. What has that been like for you?
Well, first of all, we didn't close down.
No, it closed its doors. I should have said, yeah, you've all been very active.
We've been working, probably more so than I think.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think this is the most I've ever worked in my life, because it just adds another layer of always having to be available and be ready to serve people during this unprecedented crisis.
Yes.
But it's been interesting. Like, first, I think that no one obviously expected this. So for me, just on a personal level, when you have your mindset and focus, and you have everything rolling with the culture equity plan, and you got your steps in place, you're ready to announce what's going to happen. You have the whole kind of layout and framework, and then overnight you have to literally shift all the work that you've been doing and be all hands on deck. COVID-19. I think it took me probably about a week to really for it to settle in, like, wait a minute, this is going to be our new normal for a while. And so my priorities and my expectations need to change as far as when it comes to the actual tangible work. But what I will say about the pandemic that it's allowed me to do is actually take some of those practices that we were going to start to teach in the culture equity plan, that we are going to start implementing in the culture equity plan, and apply that to everything that's going on in the services we've been providing during the pandemic.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Very early on, I think it was maybe week 2 or week 3, you appeared in a morning press conference with Mike Piscatelli, who is the head of economic development for the city.
Right.
I should say the Division of Arts, Culture, and Tourism lives under, or in the proposed city, it's a little confusing. In the proposed city budget, it now lives under the Department of Economic Development. And my understanding is it's already been operating under that model, especially as folks are like, hey, we got to band together and fight this pandemic and keep our small businesses afloat. And immediately you were instrumental in rolling out something that has become the Together New Haven campaign. And it's more than a hashtag, it's also a website. Talk a little about your work in that.
Yeah, so that has been under the leadership of Mike Piscatelli from the Economic Development Administration. Really, really thankful to be able to work with him under his leadership, and honestly, really thankful that my department now sits under that administration. What we were doing is thinking, what can we do for economic resiliency? You know, we have to be responsive. As soon as we saw the waves that the pandemic was making, the immediate thing was, how do we mitigate this damage? How do we help people during this time whose doors are going to have to close? How do we keep businesses, including creative businesses and artists who are businesses in their own right? How do we keep them working through all of this? And so what we thought about is Together New Haven as this economic resiliency effort. And under that, we've been able to launch many different initiatives. So it would be like the website, as a resource. And so with the website, you'll be able to go and get all of the information that's kind of just being released here and there. I don't know if you noticed that things were flying, like lots of resources.
It's like 20,000 things in 20,000 different places. Yes.
Yeah, all of the time. So we wanted to take that information and aggregate it and get it in a central place. And so the website served as that space for us to just aggregate as much information as we could to be able to get that information to the community. In addition to that, we were doing the Together New Haven campaign, social media campaign, where businesses and artists and creatives can be a part of the campaign in order to direct traffic specifically to their virtual offering online. So it was a campaign that also I feel like encourages, because people would submit to be a part of this campaign, but they will also give some encouraging words to their, fellow residents and community members. So it really started to just create this culture of togetherness and of support. So that's kind of how it all kind of came to be. And since then, it's grown its own wings. It's continuing to expand as we roll out different initiatives like the Together New Haven Marketplace, which will be launching soon, which is a platform where some businesses are able to get their products sold through this marketplace and pushed through the efforts of the Town Green and City of New Haven. And so we're just continuing to build different initiatives to help to support during this time. Under that also is the Creative Sector Relief Fund, which I would say I was so glad we were able to do something. As we know, the creative community has been one of the hardest hit sectors during this pandemic. People were immediately out of work. There was no alternative for many of these individuals, many of these businesses. And we wanted to have some type of fund that will provide some type of relief during this time. So we were able to raise a little over $132,000 with the help of the Arts Council. And we're continuing to do that effort.
So if people say to you, and this is not a hypothetical, I've heard it multiple times during this pandemic, if people are saying to you, I don't understand how artists in the arts are part of this, or I think that artists in the arts are extra during that, which, I mean, that gets in my craw, because I'm like, well, how many shows have you watched on Netflix, and how many things have you streamed, and what CD got you through the day? But if people are saying that to you, what's your response?
Well, I'm still kind of on this thing as they're extra. What do you think they meant by extra?
So when people have said, in the town of Hamden, which is like right over the border from New Haven, some folks have written in saying we should cut the Department of Arts and Culture altogether, which is wild to me. It's also the lowest funded department in the town. So if you're going to cut something, I would say cut the police department or cut fire. But that's just personally how I'm feeling. But people have said, oh, we don't need this during a pandemic. It's not necessary during a pandemic.
That's what I have to say. Wow. Because, first of all, artists and the arts during this time has been instrumental in keeping people sane in their mental health and giving people things to actually do. I mean, we have to acknowledge the fact that people's worlds turn upside down, not just from an economic standpoint, but from a mental and spiritual standpoint. And the only thing that has been really provided as this outlet, as this connectivity of community during this time, the only consistent thing has been the arts, has been the arts community, the artists who are going above and beyond to provide these new platforms for people to thrive on, to stay connected on, and to get resources on. So I don't agree, is what I would say. I think that it's, it's way off. And this, Lucy, this has always been a thing. When we think about the arts is the first to go. It's the first to get cut. It's always at, the bottom of the barrel. And we don't give the arts enough credit for what it does for our communities in general. I think if we saw anything if we have seen anything, since we're still going through the pandemic, if we've seen anything, is the fact that when you take arts and culture away, your world becomes very dark quickly. I think a lot of people we're seeing who aren't necessarily in the arts, but they enjoy the arts in many different ways. They were realizing how connected to the arts community that they were now that everything's closed. And I think we just don't give the arts enough credit for the power it carries in connecting people together and bringing people together, but also in how it can help in other cross-sector areas in other disciplines. The arts is an instrumental tool that can be used to have issues of social change, to talk about the pandemic and actually come up with some tangible solutions, working with these different these different categories of businesses. So I don't necessarily ever understand that perspective. And I would argue it to the end.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about this because we are coming up on this May 20th date that the state has rolled out. So not specifically the city. Yes. The state has rolled out as the beginning of a 4-phase plan to reopen the state's economy. Mayor Justin Elicker yesterday in a press conference said on the record, I don't know if I'd be comfortable going out and getting my hair cut. I don't know if I'd be comfortable going out and going to a restaurant. At the same time, you have the Connecticut Office of the Arts, with which you are intimately familiar, roll out guidelines that are not hard and fast, but more suggestions of, hey, if you're someone who works in the arts, if you're an individual artist or an institution, here's what you might want to be thinking about. What are you hearing from artists, and what are some of the conversations around this May 20th? Because Adriane, I've talked to a lot of artists who have said, listen, the governor can do what he wants, but I'm staying right in my living room.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's just it right there. Most people are like, May 20th, like, I'm not, it's like what you just said, verbatim, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not opening my doors because I don't feel safe yet. No one has really put, and this is what I'm hearing from other people, in their opinion, no one has put really thing in place yet that's going to ensure their safety. And people want to feel safe. They want to feel safe. And I think that we're still not there. And I think most people are not ready, are not ready to reopen. And of course, there are some people who are. There are some people who think we're not opening, quick enough. And that's nationwide. We see the protests, we see what's going on. But these are people, in my opinion, who are really out of touch with reality and what's really still happening on a health perspective to a lot of communities who are it's just not safe yet, who feel it's not safe yet to reopen. So I think I've heard kind of both sides, but I would say it's probably weighing more towards the people are still not sure about the May 20th date.
Yeah. So for you, as someone who is at the center of a lot of these arts communities and conversations in New Haven, what does that mean? What are you maybe expecting to see? And this is something I've talked to some folks in theater who have said, like, we're figuring out if it makes sense for us to bag our season, or if it makes sense for us to like do a performance in a parking lot with 10 people.
Yeah, we're hearing a combination of different things. So we're hearing some people say We may reopen, but when we reopen, it's definitely our workspace and our performance space is going to look entirely different. And we might not be in the venue that our audiences are used to seeing our, whatever form of art they're doing in. We are going to do maybe outside productions for a little while and see how that goes. We're going to keep the audience number low. So maybe if it's like 1,000 people who can be in a space, that's not going to happen, obviously for a very long time. So I know a lot of people who are pushing their entire season off until at least October. And there's some people who are not even planning on a season at all for next year. So you're hearing a mixture. And I think that's because people want to be able to be responsive and make sure that the audience members and their presenters and their performers are going to be safe and that they're going to be able to ensure that safety. And I think right now, until we really get some concrete solutions around how we can help the arts and culture navigate and kind of get back into that mode, it's just going to take some time. It's definitely going to take some time. Think about it like this. You have musicians who are, on stage with each other. And if you're not within 6 feet, and maybe even if you are within 6 feet, you're blowing spit out of instruments. That's something that takes a little bit more thinking through on how that's going to work. Because for the arts and culture, some of the solutions that have been provided just don't work. So I think we still have to think through this. And I'm working and talking to different leaders and artists to see what the needs are. But I think that the Office of the Arts did a great job with being the first to come out, one of the first to come out with a response and some guidelines. And they did a great job on even just offering suggestions, knowing that it's not going to be a one size fits all. So let people think through, these different ways that they can start to reopen their arts community or business.
So I want to remind listeners or viewers now in this brave new world of Zoom that that you're listening / watching Arts Respond. I'm Lucy Gellman. This is WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. And I am here with Adriane Jefferson. She's the Director of Cultural Affairs for the City of New Haven. So Adriane, I want to ask you what some of the sort of cultural inequities and gaps you were seeing before the pandemic were, and how maybe those have been exacerbated or made clearer by the pandemic.
Oh gosh, there's so much. I will start with, and I appreciate your questions. Like these are important questions. I will start with lack of information, lack of access. Sometimes it's just the small things. And really, information and lack of access to that information is a major problem when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and barriers. When you just look at information alone, sometimes the information as it's relayed is not speaking in layman's terms. We're speaking over people's heads. People don't feel like we're talking to them because they don't even know what we're talking about. So I think it's just about scaling that back and just talking from a human perspective that anybody can understand. Is a major thing. Then also disseminating the information and how we look to disseminate information. And a lot of the times, traditional marketing does not work for that. We need to do boots on the ground marketing. We need to be in the neighborhoods, working with food trucks and ice cream trucks that maybe roll through the neighborhoods. We need to be really using influencers from the community activists who are trusted and respected in these communities to really spread the message. And that's grassroots marketing and grassroots organizing. And it works really well. But I would say one of the most evident inequities that I've just seen, honestly, like everywhere from before I started this job, is the fact that information only gets us so far. And then when the information still does maybe reach vulnerable communities, they don't think we're talking to them because they don't understand. They don't always understand. There's like a disconnect culturally with the materials that's being put in front of them. So I believe that we have to be more culturally relevant when we're trying to reach different audiences. I think, environment, with this pandemic, we say socially distance. there's some environments that have not allowed for social distancing. You know, if you're in a community that's real close together, if you stay in the projects, how do you socially distance within that? You know, I think that this brought light on just the environment of that. It also brought light on the fact that, you know, African Americans and Black Americans and Latino Americans have been hit very hard for years with diseases, underlying diseases, because of the lack of access to health care, not being able to afford certain types of health care. And so now when the pandemic comes, it's not that the pandemic caused these viruses in us, it's that we are more susceptible because of these underlying diseases. And that's because of the entire health program and what we can do to support that. Same thing with environmental conditions, global warming. If you look at just the Black and Brown community and how global warming is impacting those communities, that plays a role in our health as well. Education, same thing with education. You know, with this, it has created even more of an education divide and even a digital divide. So now you have people who might have been struggling in school before. Now you're asking them to have to, you know, obviously, you know, you have to do remote work, but now you're struggling even more because we were already struggling in the classroom. Now, you're asking us to do remote work. How are we supposed to adjust to that? Right. So there's just many different things that fundamentally have been happening that all align to structural issues and a lack of resources. And I can go on and on. There's a lot that's been highlighted.
Yeah. Well, I both want to know directly how the arts, first let's talk about directly how the arts can step in and help that. And I mean that in the sense of disseminating information, but I also mean that in the sense of giving a voice to artists and compensating artists. So certainly the Creative Sector Relief Fund is one of those ways. It's giving money to people with no strings attached. A lot of grants, I feel like, unfortunately, have strings attached. So they say, you can't use this you have to use this on a project. You can't use it on groceries. Well, an artist might really need groceries for that week. And so I think that's one way. Another way is I want to talk a little about a campaign, Adriane, that you worked on called the Mask It Up campaign.
Yes.
Because I think this touches on several of the issues and the intersection of arts and public health. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, the Mask Up campaign is a partnership with the New Haven Department of Health, with Marissa Bonds, and it's an effort of Mayor Elliker as well. And what we really wanted to do is make sure that the information was essentially reaching Black and Brown communities in the hot spots that have been most impacted during COVID-19. You know, young people, and particularly you will see just in New Haven and beyond, are still not necessarily wearing masks. And I think that there's still this thinking that because I'm young, I'm not necessarily going to get it, which was the information that was given out in the beginning, right? That there was misinformation and misguidance in the beginning that still is now impacting so many communities of color and young people as well. And so what we wanted to do was partner with influencers who are trusted in their community, well respected within their discipline and in their craft, and get them on billboards and get them on social media wearing some really great masks and just saying like, hey, mask it up and protect yourself and protect your community and protect the people you love the most. And so that's really what that campaign is intended to do. We just rolled out the first social media ad for that. So you'll see them roll out in a drip campaign for the next couple of weeks. And then eventually in about 2 weeks, they'll be on billboards throughout the city.
And I will say, in my humble opinion, the photos are beautiful. They're also like really fun to look at.
Good.
There's one photo, and Slay Washington has a mask that matches his Omega Sci-Fi jacket.
Yes.
And it looks really good. And it's like in the sunlight, and the sun's coming down, and it feels like, yes, we're in a pandemic, and yes, the world is on its head, but like, at least we got some sun.
And shout out
like,
to
it's gonna be okay.
It is, and the photographers killed it. We have to shout them
Yes.
out, like Donnell and Tiffany and Lee, who all pretty much, did this for us pro bono and just wanted to give back during this time to their community and partner with the city. So it wouldn't have been made possible without the photographers who volunteered their time.
Yes. So I also want to ask you, because I've seen some arts organizations and institutions that have like stepped up, and it hasn't always been who I'm not going to point any fingers, because that's a dangerous game in this city. It's 132,000 people in 18.7 square miles. So yeah. But
yeah, they'll know what you're talking about.
They'll know. But I've seen some organizations step up and think, wow, like I didn't expect that. That is super awesome. And I'm talking within the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. And then I've seen some organizations where I've thought like, is that how you're going to help artists? And so if people are coming to you and saying, how do I help? How do I help artists get through this time? And maybe it's artists who can't practice their art because they're helping their kids do distance learning work. And maybe it's artists who are like, I don't know how I'm going to pay rent next month. But what are you telling them? What are those conversations?
Well, it really just depends on who they are and what resources that they have available. So I encourage people to look at the resources that they have, like what they have in their hand to work with and what they can make possible and practical. So if you're an organization that's larger and has an operating budget that's over $500,000, let's talk about maybe how you can rework those programs and rethink those programs in a way that's going to serve the people who need help right now. And that may mean redesigning your entire season. That may mean rerouting some money to start a relief fund of your own. That may mean turning everything online virtually in a way that doesn't cost money, doesn't charge, and just makes it more accessible for people. Now, if you're a smaller nonprofit organization, I think what I've seen is that they don't have as many resources, but they're very creative with the ways that they seek to help. So I think it's about sparking the creativity and looking at partnerships during this time and really working together, not thinking of yourself in a silo, but thinking of yourself in a greater community and how you can maybe attach yourself to people who are already doing things that are starting to help during this pandemic. So those are the little things, but I just think that it varies depending on what the organization is. And I don't think that there's a one answer for everyone.
Well, I'm also conscious of time, so this is my last or maybe second to last question. But
yeah, no worries.
I want to ask what work looks like for you and for the department going forward, knowing that we're in a period of great uncertainty, but that you are already doing work on cultural equity, partly behind the scenes, although you schooled the board of alders recently in what a cultural equity plan is. And I loved listening to that. I thought it was great. It was very clear to me that some of them hadn't heard the words cultural equity plan in one place before. So what does this work look like going forward for you, Adriane?
Oh, honestly, and I think I was saying earlier that it's really interesting because it's kind of been happening in reverse. We don't have the cultural equity plan yet, but we have a lot of the things that are important to a cultural equity plan. And so we've already started to work with the different departments as it is to breaking down the barriers to access, as it is to partnering with influencers and community activists to really start to build and shape programs during this pandemic that have been responsive or hopefully will be responsive to people who are in the Black and Brown communities, who are part of the LGBTQ community and all of these different marginalized groups. So that work is kind of already being done. So what we're going to look to do is a number of different things. One, I feel like expanding on the things we've started to create during this pandemic, expanding on, we have something rolling out soon called the Civic Space, which will be an opportunity for engagement from the community to hear their thoughts and get their contributions. I think it's an expansion of things like that. It's an expansion of togetherness and pushing our creative businesses and providing relief for a really long time, because this isn't, tomorrow we're back to normal. We're still figuring out what the new normal is. So I think there's that. Now, in addition to that, we are going to get back to the cultural equity plan. And I think, if anything, we're seeing now more than ever the need for a cultural equity plan. You know, look at what the pandemic has done to our most vulnerable communities, to our Black and Brown communities, and all of the reasons that I stated earlier about what I'm seeing that's been highlighted during this pandemic due to inequities, is exactly why we need to roll out this cultural equity plan. So we are going to still do that. And I'm hoping in the next month or two, we will get rolling again on that process.
Yeah. I just want to ask, I've been very curious when I've talked to artists and arts leaders about this. So the pandemic is not just like a trauma that's out there, right? It's a trauma that's also happening to all of us personally. And so how are you practicing sanity and care and just taking care of yourself?
Oh, that's such a good question. It's a struggle in general. I have for many years, I've always been like this career woman. I'm also a mother. And I've always struggled with taking the time out for myself to recharge and to find balance. And I really just recently discovered that in the last year and a half, being able to really take time out to meditate, to pray often, to just take a break and go by the water, which I love. I love water. The way that I operate is that I can go for a very long time, but I need that time to recharge in order to continue to do the work. And so I have been taking time out for myself to do all of those things. And I've had to be very intentional about it. Like, I literally have to calendar it in. I won't do it. Like, take a break now. And my daughter, she's so amazing and so wise. She'll come up to me and be like, "Mommy, you're working a lot. Like, let's have some fun." Like she said that. She grabbed my phone the other day, put it down and said, let's have some fun.
Oh, I love
and
that.
She just kind of brought me back into reality. So that's kind of, I'm trying my best, because I believe that we're no good to anyone else if we don't know how to be good to ourselves first. So I'm working on it.
I love that. If people want to know where to find you, or if they're seeing this and they say, "Hey, I had no idea the city had a division of arts, culture, and tourism," what's the best way for them to find you?
I would say find me on Instagram. You can find me personally on Instagram. That's the easiest way. My handle is Adriane V. Jefferson, which is ADRIANE V. Jefferson. And then also, if you go to the city's website and you go to the Department of Cultural Affairs, you'll be able to find information about our department. And we also have a Twitter account, and we also have a Facebook account. So New Haven Department of Cultural Affairs on both of those platforms.
Adriane, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I know that you are going all the time, and I hope that you have a moment to stop and rest and be by the water and take care of yourself today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I knew this was going to be a blast. And likewise, take care of yourself. You're doing a lot too, Lucy. You're doing a lot. We appreciate you. We appreciate all that you do.
This will just be a mutual love fest.
Yeah, we just love each other.
Yes, I know. I haven't seen you in person for I think 8 weeks. So it's tough.
I just can't wait to hug people again and all of that, get back to some type of normal.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lucy. Bye.
Bye.